Good morning. Hope everyone is doing well. I gonna get the chat box up, so come aboard. It's a beautiful day here. I hope it is where you are as well. Hey, Debbie, Pennsylvania. Hopefully it's nice across the country. We have had just hot, beautiful weather this week. It's been wonderful. Got some gardening done, but they say a little bit of cold is coming next week. Hi, Lynn. How are you? Coming from the West Coast. That's good. Hopefully, you've been having some nice weather there too. I always seem to talk about weather, and it's really not that big of a deal to me. But I'm glad to see you guys here. Today we're going to have a number of things that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. And I'd like to start with, first of all, just thank you so much for being a part of our Saturdays here at the Quilt Show, and especially learning all the new things that we have coming up here on my section of it with the Quilt Sampler. And I want to first of all tell you that Ricky Timms has a new class coming out that you might be interested in. I've got a picture here. Let me grab it so you can see what it is. He calls it Portal. It's made from a single shape, which he calls ladyfingers. And this quilt can look completely different by where you put your colors and your values in it. So watch for that. I know there are kits in the store, so just go to the Quilt Show store and you'll find the kit there for that. And that's a lovely piece that you might choose to make. So that's coming up. Check with the Quilt on the Quilt Show newsletter, and that will be continue to be advertised. So please check in with that. All right, then I want to show you. I am always totally amazed, and it's what for me as a teacher, what I always wanted is my students to go far beyond what I ever taught them. Take the nuggets of what they learned and then do their own thing. And I believe her name is Kay. And if I've got that wrong, I'm so sorry. But look at this bag and check that out. Is that not pretty? She sent me a number of pictures, so I want to share all of those with you so that you can see what she has done. I'll just kind of move them around here so they'll all fit on the screen, and you can see just what a lovely. And here's another one. I think these are all the sides of her bag, but just, it just makes my heart glad to see. Let me go up. And here is this one. Take that one down. There it is. All right. But just absolutely beautiful. Some of these are overlapping, so I want to get that. But just take a look at how pretty her bag turned out, and wonderful. I hope that all of you that made the rice bag just had a blast with it, and it turned out, every bit of what you wanted it to be. So thank you for sending me those pictures. That was a joyful thing for me to be able to see what you've accomplished and done with the process. And so that brings me to today. We're going to look at the process of making molas. And mola means cloth, and it is from the Kuna Indians off the San Bloss Islands off of Panama. And so these group of women took their, their native talents plus things that were imported in with, immigrants and that type of thing and made it into what they called molas. And which is basically cloth, and it was to make their clothing. And what I understand, if I've got this correct, is that they would use panels and make these molas on the panels, and then the panels were sewn across the top, leaving an opening for their head, and then sleeves were sewn on the sides where those openings would have been for their arms. And they're absolutely stunning and beautiful. And I have seen several different things about how they're made. One is reverse applique, and I think that's how most of us understand and think of the construction of the mola as reverse applique through many layers of fabric, cutting away and doing that stitch. So, but I also watched several documentaries in the past, and I've read a number of books. And when I first tried doing molas, it's been a number of years ago, so I don't remember everything exactly, but I do remember building on top of, we did a turned applique on top, which also produced some of what went on with the molas, and doing embroidery work on it, and drawing our own patterns onto the fabric so that we could make them ourselves, and we weren't tracing a pattern or whatever. But I know that through the years molas have changed, and they're done differently and in many ways. Today, what I'm going to show you is the process as I understand it. It may not be the exact way at whatever. But again, when I am working on this and teaching, I want to show you a process. And then as, with the bags, take it to the next level, take it to your level and do it. Because right now, what I feel is important is that you learn the process. And even if it's something you never want to do and you are simply here to watch the show, and if you try things, just practice, those things that you learn or watch or understand will help you as you are doing the quilts or the processes that you want to do that excite you. And it may trigger how to solve a problem or how to do something a little bit differently. So I encourage you to watch, to try new things, not necessarily that it's going to become your thing, but it will help you as you do your quilting. And so I hope you understand a little bit of that as we move forward. So let me... And Yolanda, I noticed that you wrote all the kits are gone. I'll use my scraps, and that's great. For as far as the rice bags are concerned, they're going to have some more kits in the store. So I'm very excited about that. So yay for more kits coming up. And if you want to know when those kits are in the store, you can go to the shop and find the rice bag kit, and you can click on where it says notify me, and you'll get a notification in your emails. And so then you will be able to order a kit if you still want one. And they're beautiful kits. So the fabrics are just absolutely wonderful. And if you make one rice bag, you'll have fabric left over for other things. And someone emailed me and said that they had made a small one, a very very small one. I think like 5 inches or something is where she started from. And so I tried one too. I don't have it sewn completely together, but I think I'm going to love it because it's a little bit smaller and it's going to hold some things that get lost in a big bag. So anyway, Any more Mola kits? That I don't know. Hopefully, Kristen will put up a notification, or she'll let us know what is going to happen with that, if they're going to have any more Mola kits. But truly, any solid fabric works well for this. So if you have any scraps or whatever, go for it. And what I'm going to do with my Mola when I finish it, and I certainly haven't finished it, working on that. And so I saw that Kristen just put up Mola kits are sold out with a sad face. So I'm going to do a tote bag. I'm going to use it for a side of that. It could be used for a zipper bag. It could be made into a pillow. It could, if you enlarge the pattern or whatever, if you particularly like this pattern, or draw your own. The Indian women, the Kuna Indian women, often drew their own, and it was based on animals, things of nature, that type of idea. And it was very primitive, almost childlike drawings. And they're doing all kinds of new things. I also want to tell you that Margaret Willingham is going to be on the new season of the Quilt Show, and she is going to be sharing with you Mola. And so if you want to know more and get into the nitty gritty of all of this, watch her show. And so let's get started on the process. I'm going to drop you down to the table. This works, and the thinking that goes into it from my perspective. So here we go. In front of me, I have I cut up, some of this so I could practice. Here is a practice piece I was messing around with when I got it, when I first started, and it's pretty messy, and because I haven't done this in a long time. So I just got this piece, and we're gonna use 3 layers for this particular pattern. And so the first thing that I needed to decide is what I wanted for the background of my whole pattern. And that's all this space out here, okay, on the side. So I decided I wanted this lavenderish color for that. And then I made a decision on this part right here, which was going to be my orange. And then in here, I wanted to use the lime green. Now, I probably, as you can see here, I already showed you this messy piece, but there's not a ton of contrast between the two. I think there's enough, and it certainly shows up, and it's brighter in person than it is on screen. But you could maybe choose something a little bit darker here. This, either go the darkest dark or the lightest light on the outside, and then work your way into that. So then what I am going to do is that piece that you want as this background area, it's going to lay right side down first. Then your second layer that you're going to be working with, and for our purposes today, it's this section in here, would go down second. All right. And this would be the larger section in here, and that's going to go down right side down, all of them right side down. Now, this is the one that I am going to draw my pattern on, so that I can begin that process of reverse applique. I started a Baltimore album quilt some time ago, and this is reverse applique. This is 1 layer of fabric with a backing on it, and this is all by hand, again turning it under, and so that the background shows through on the openings that you cut. So that's in essence for those of you who have done that type of quilting before. So I'm going to lay these aside, and I'm going to take this one, and just for the sake of today, I'm just going to copy one of the, let me get, so, a light box works great for this. I used for mine the Quilter Select free, self-erase marker. It lasted, for a short time, but I didn't get it finished. So I had to go back and do some retracing because it does disappear automatically. And after a couple of days, it had completely gone. So if you're not fast and you're not going to do it all at one time, so I am now using a friction pen, and all I'm doing is tracing my pattern. And the friction pen, as long as you don't touch anything hot to it, stays put. Whatever marking, I mean, you could even, use a pencil for that matter. So I've got my, my piece there. I want to talk about this circle. I made the decision to not reverse applique because it's small. And you could do pretty much anything in there that you would like to decorative. I started, didn't do real well on my satin stitch to begin with. My circle got a little egg-shaped. And so I need to practice that and get back to it. But I thought that I would embroidery with these absolutely fantastic colors that came in our packet with us. And I'll show you some other possibilities for that. So I'm leaving that circle. I'll either embroidery it. You could, even use wool or something else, to make those small circles using, Karen K. Buckley's circles or, other templates that you might have. So let me get rid of my light box and my... So here I have started. Now I put both of these on the back side, but really I want to start as I did here without this center one in, because we're going to go back and put that one in, draw it. I have it drawn over here, but I'm not going to sew it. As you can see on this side, I used white thread, so it was a little bit more visible to you on that. Now, there's two things that I would like to share with you. One is you can do this by hand because you're going to be making you're going to outline this outer part, and you can do it by hand or you can do it by machine. Right now, my hands are giving me a little bit of a fit with, that tingling and all of that. So I am choosing not to do this with, by hand stitching. But you can do this. I did this one hand stitched. And I want to share with you one of the things that you got in your kit, and that's these black gold needles. And I want to tell you that if you do any hand stitching where you're using batiks, like putting a binding on your quilt, whatever, these work really, really well. They're absolutely sharp, and they go through the tight woven fabrics very neatly. And I found that they worked best for me when I was trying, because on my practice piece, I did hand stitch around the edge, and it's just a running stitch is all it is. But I am choosing to machine stitch. I am not lengthening my stitch at all, because one thing that happens with that is that if you did all your stitching, let it sit overnight, and then the next day come back and stitch it, it holds a memory. And I'm going to show you, and that makes the turning much easier. I learned that from a teacher some time ago, and it really does work. So all I'm going to do at this point is stitch around that outer circle. And it does go a little bit quicker, and makes this. All I have to be able to do is undo those stitches, which a seam ripper works just fine for. Going around the curve of the top, you have to stop a little bit, and but it's still much faster than going through 3 layers of fabric by hand. All right, so now I have my piece that is stitched around that outside piece, and I'm going to take my seam ripper and I'm going to go in because I want to cut away that inside part of this. And so I just went in and made a little hole so that I could come back with my scissors, and whatever little pair of scissors that you have that you can get in there, and we're just gonna cut away that top layer, and I'm gonna go in and leave enough that you can effectively turn it under. About 1/4 of an inch will work just fine. And I'm not being very neat here. Probably should be a little neater. And then, because you're going around a curve at the top, you might want to maybe a thread or 2 away from the edge of where your stitching is. Just cut that curve a little bit, and that'll make the turning a little bit easier. And then when you get down here, do the same thing into your corners, and that'll help that whole turning process. So now, and I don't see my needle, you want to find a and you know what, I just cut from the wrong side, so please stop. We're going to go back. This is where I wanted to cut, not back here. And so I just messed this totally up, and I so apologize for that. So please stop, and let's go back and let's start this again, and we can get through at least 2 layers in the process. I can't believe I did something so goofy. I totally just ruined this whole thing. I'm so sorry. So just ignore everything that I just did, okay, back there. All right, this is what I meant to do. Now we won't have any of this color back here when we cut into the next one, but I'll show you on this other piece or on another area here of how we can do that. So let me get my thread, and I want to talk a little bit about thread. I want to try to match this purple as best I can, and so I've got this right here. This one is Superior Bob. It's something Bob, Super Bob or whatever. And this is Quilter Select. These threads, as you can see, this one has more of a matte finish. This one has a wonderful sheen, and it's very thin. It's the Masterpiece, I believe, on the from Quilter Select. Both are wonderful in terms of color, and they work beautifully for my applique. So I'm going to grab some thread here. I don't want to sit on or step on my needle wherever I knocked it off. Wouldn't that be fun? So I'll just thread the needle. Thank you for your patience with me today. Well, now you can see that mistakes do happen, and if you make them, the good thing is you can just move on. All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to start here on the side, and I'm going to remove, and this one won't show, you know, the stitches overall as well as, you know, the next one. We're going to pull those threads out, and then you would begin that process of taking, and when it is you know, it has had a little bit of time to sit there, it just folds back on the dots or that seam line when you take those out. Then simply start right here. And it's a matter of stitching and my thread. And then you're just going to take an applique stitch and stitch all the way around. And I like to move from the bottom up. You know, with what I saw in the books that I read, and when I learned before, is that they use actually the Kuna Indian women and men, both of them, is going under and then coming up. They leave the actual thread shows more. But I have this thing with, you know, my applique. I don't want the thread to show if I can help it. So I work along that way. You would completely do all of this. Then you would go back and sew on that other line. So let's go to my actual mola here that I'm doing, and I'll keep the purple thread, but as I work on this process, I'm going to go in, get that started, and then I want to trim out, and hopefully you'll see a little bit better that you know, because this has sat overnight. I sewed this in yesterday, and so it has sat for, you know, about 24 hours, maybe a little bit more. And how easily that this turns. All right, so now I've got that cut out. I'm going to again snip around there, and I want to go into the corners so that they will turn a little bit more easily. And again, just a thread or two away from the edge. All right. But before I start turning that, I want to go in and see your questions. If you have any other further questions, so if you have anything to ask, please go there now. I use a single Quilter Select 80 weight is the other ring. I love it. And yes, and Masterpiece is Superior Threads. Thank you, Kristen. Needle retrieving. I have magnets. I even made some, and you can do your own magnets if you get those little circles and the button making tool. You can cover it in cloth and use the button in the inside. Cut away the tool. You can kind of make your own, or the Tula Pink has great ones for that. And I should be using it. Oh, well, thank you for your kindness in that, making the mistakes. Yeah, the machine stitching, because my hands were giving me grief. So would you typically use a large piece of fabric and trace the entire design? If you were going to make this into a quilt, I almost think a part of me would say do it in blocks and then sew those blocks together. Mostly it was used for clothing. So yes, you would put the design completely on the whole piece to begin with. And so I think whichever way works best for you in terms of bulk and all of that. Is there a Mola pattern? Yes, the one that I'm using. The patterns really for Mola, again, I want to say are you draw your own, and they're very primitive. That's the best word I can use, or childlike, and you can draw anything. They used a lot of animals in their work, and truly, a lot of them were what was native to that area of of Panama and the San Blas Islands. And I don't even know San Blas. I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing it correctly, but they were native to those the native people there. So I'll come back to any further questions that you might have in a moment. I do not know if you can see, but the holes from the stitching are there, so that when I turn this, it's like it lays right, it stops itself and lays where, and I'm feeling very so when I take that and turn it under, it just goes right where those holes were, and I barely did anything to turn that. And so again, the stitches are go under where you came up and come right at to the edge or in the seam line, and try to keep them at no bigger than 1/8 of an inch if you can. And so you're sewing right along that and keeping those stitches in place. And then when you get to the point where you need to and I lost my needle, so there you go. I'm just, boy, am I having troubles today. So you would keep turning that under, and again, it just really wants to turn right back on where I sewed. And once you get that finished, then you're going to go to the back side and you're going to stitch around the next piece. And when you stitch around that next piece, you're going to do the same thing again. You're going to cut out the center and needle turn it back, and that will show you your 3 layers: your top layer, this middle layer, and then your bottom layer. And you will end up with something that looks similar to this, only much better. This was my first and my practice piece that I was working on. And back to this, somebody mentioned buttons. You can, do a lot of other embroidery on it. Even if you wanted to, you could certainly do this more or less as raw edge, and you could machine stitch a stitch around here, or stitch that completely with your machine with that little blind stitch. Other decorative stitches and stuff. The other thing that the that the women did would be to cut a slit, and then they would turn that, and you would have these slits in this open part if they wanted to fill this in. Now, we had the butterfly on the original pattern, and it didn't quite, it went off the 10 inches, but you could certainly move it down into the corners, and you could put a butterfly, that butterfly in each of the four corners, and make that work as well. The other thing that they often did in here that you could do instead of putting even that circle in is that they would stitch a leaf pattern or just a straight line of embroidery stitching along this. There were many different things that they use these yarns for, and you've got these beautiful colors that will match what was in the kit. But any embroidery thread that you have, if you were not able to get the kit, would work in there. So I want to go back and take a quick look at your questions, because this really is the process, and it's pretty simple if you do it right the first time. And hopefully nobody saw that and turn the camera or their computer off at that particular point. So choose which fabric you want on the top part. That goes down first. Your second row of stitching goes down next. Where you draw your pattern goes on the top. Trace your pattern onto that piece, put it back, stitch around the first area that you are going to turn. And for this particular pattern, I wanted to see this section of material. So I cut that center out, needle turned it, then I came, needle turn on this side. Then you come back and you're going to stitch around that second pattern. And then once you have that stitched, it'll show up here. You cut away the center of that, and again, you're going to stitch that down, and that's really the process of doing the mola. And here it's all going to be this orange color around here because there's only one pattern unless you choose to add something else to it. So that is the process, and let's see if you have any. What stitch length, I did not change. I just, whatever your, seam ripper will go under is fine. I just use my regular 2.5. I didn't change anything on that. Coloring books are a good source for design. Absolutely. Are you stitching through all the layers or only the layer one down? Sometimes I stitch one layer, sometimes 2, 3, depending on, how I catch it. But normally I would go through all 3 layers. Hopefully you saw the back side a couple times. Yeah, we're going to do Hawaiian quilt blocks next week, and it's very similar to that. And so shopping bags with a single mola block, absolutely. And let's see. And, somebody said something about the buttons. All right. Okay, good morning. I don't see any other questions right at the moment. Maybe Kristen saw something and could help out there if I missed something. So anyway, that is the process of a mola. I learn a great deal from trying these different things because it teaches me, a process that I can use to make quilt blocks when you're done. Do you trim off the bottom 2 layers? I probably not. I wouldn't do that. So you're not going to need as much batting, if any at all, because you have that. You might want to put a piece of batting into the, connecting pieces. The word's not coming to me right at the moment. as if you use this as one of many quilt blocks, would it be very thick when you sew them together? Yes, it would be, to that extent. And so you could maybe trim your 1/4 inch away that you're going to sew on, so that you're not sewing through 3 layers. The reason I would say not to cut away these, it just compromises, some of the stitching, I think. But I don't know that for a fact. Because it would be thick if you made a whole quilt, but I wouldn't put a batting in it, maybe a piece of flannel or something, and but nothing else with that. They as I remember the pictures and from taking the class, they marked the entire quilt top first, one sheet, and then did it, and that was it. I don't exactly remember how they finished it off, but I'm sure it was a binding, where like a normal quilt would have been, with a binding through those layers. But other than that, you wouldn't have to use anything else, because you've got your 3 layers of fabric here. And sometimes they would go up to 7 layers depending on how intricate their design was. And so I have never tried more than 3 layers when I've done it. I've only done it a few times. I'll be very, very honest with you in this. I learned the process. And that's why I was talking about this, because sometimes this isn't going to be something I'm going to want to do all the time, or that, because my hands are not allowing me to do that much handwork anymore. And so I save my handwork for those things that I still want to accomplish, and that. But the process of learning Mola was very helpful to me, because when I ran into issues with my quilting in other places and on other quilts and where I worked, that memory from doing the Mola and trying it would jump into my brain, and I would know how to solve some issues and problems with, future things, because I had learned this technique. And I think it's wonderful that no matter where in the world, the one thing that as we do some more of these, Hawaiian quilting, the Tivaevae, we're going to do Bojagi, is that each country and each section of, a group of women would come together. They would take the things that they had learned from, the settlers that came to their land, the immigrants, and they would, incorporate that into their own traditions and make their own new traditions. Because Tivaevae, Hawaiian Quilting, and Mola, there's not a ton of difference between them. They've just made it their own. And I encourage you, you've seen this now, you've seen the process, you know how it works. So what if I did this? What if? I always try to ask that question, and I, told my students for years, always ask the questions, what if? Because you're going to make some wonderful new discoveries every time you ask that, what if? And so do that, make it your own, and enjoy the process. And if you change anything up, there's nothing wrong with that. That's wonderful. It's now yours, and you've added your own touch and flair and your artistic talent to the project. So with that in mind, next week we're going to look at the process, and we're going to make a Hawaiian quilting block. I am going to share with you a pillow that I made in a class that I was fortunate enough, the one time that we went to Hawaii with our family, took a class at a local shop and made this pillow, and I'm very proud of it. I haven't really done a lot with that since then, but I'm going to show you again how to do a Hawaiian quilting project. And purses, tote bags, pillows, even placemats and things like that are great ways to use these projects that we're doing. And I'm so grateful that you are here and that you are learning along with me, and that most of you don't expect me to be perfect at all of this. And so I thank you also for that and for sticking it out. So with that in mind, I am excited to work with you on Hawaiian quilting next week. Very beautiful stuff. And so we'll see you then. Have a great week, whatever you're doing. And blessings to all of you.